What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and I know you are not looking forward to Super Bowl 57 because the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be in it. Hopefully they lose, though. We're all rooting for the Kansas City Chiefs, and we're all rooting for the Cowboys to be in the big game, of course, themselves this time next year. And if that's going to happen, it is not going to be with Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator. We talked about it in a video already here on our channel. Please do subscribe. That Kellen Moore is out as the Dallas Cowboys offensive coordinator. To date, Kellen has spent 5 seasons on the Cowboys staff as a whole, and the last 4 of them have been as the team's offensive coordinator. But actually, right after the Eagles punched their ticket to Super Bowl 57 on Sunday, it was reported by the Dallas Morning News that Kellen will not return for a 5th year as the team's offensive coordinator specifically. Now, Kellen did survive the transition from Jason Garrett to Mike McCarthy, so that is certainly interesting. Mike McCarthy, by the way, who will now be calling the offensive plays for the Dallas Cowboys. McCarthy, for what it's worth, did that for a majority of his time as the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. There was a little moment in 2015 where he surrendered those duties. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We're going to talk about some candidates to replace Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys in just a moment. But before we do, in case you had not seen it, Kellen Moore is slated to become the new offensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Chargers. So that is going to be very interesting to see Kellen work with Justin Herbert. Obviously, for what it's worth, the Dallas Cowboys will visit the Chargers in 2023. So later on next season, we will get to see Dan Quinn's defense go up against Kellen Moore's offense. But we are focused on the Cowboys now and focused on candidates to replace Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator of the Cowboys. Again, Mike McCarthy is set to call plays, but you still have to have an offensive coordinator. You still have to have somebody who's more than just the title, more than just in the role specifically. There are obviously all sorts of duties and important responsibilities associated with being the team's offensive coordinator. But again, this is Mike McCarthy's show at this point in time, and a point I've been making a lot on all of our properties here at Blogging the Boys. If you're somebody who's maybe a little bit against this, and I'm somebody who kind of feels that way. I'm a big fan of Kellen Moore. Obviously, the Cowboys offense has seen a lot of success with him calling the shots, but you have to figure out what Mike McCarthy is as a play caller. If Mike McCarthy was to be dismissed or fired or whatever the case a year from now, and we never saw him call plays for the Cowboys, that would be a shame. And that's not to say I'm the biggest believer in Mike McCarthy, the play caller, but Mike McCarthy built his way in the NFL as an offensive mind. You have to learn. You have to figure out. You have to know beyond a shadow of a doubt what he can offer to the table as an offensive play caller. And at the very least, we're going to get to see that. So we will be able to make a determination one way or another. Hopefully it is in the positive direction. But candidates to replace Kellen Moore, let's start with the in-house ones for the Dallas Cowboys. The fantastic David Howman wrote about this subject at bloggingtheboys.com. We put a link to the article down in the description. Go check that out for more of Howman's thoughts, specifically Brian Schottenheimer. This name makes a lot of sense. Again, the fact that Mike McCarthy is going to be calling plays himself suggests or implies that it is going to maybe not necessarily be an in-house promotion, but somebody who Mike McCarthy trusts, somebody who is a McCarthy guy, somebody who he knows very well. Obviously, anybody who's currently on the offensive staff fits that bill. It would make sense. And obviously, Brian Schottenheimer is an NFL name, or Schottenheimer is an NFL name. We all know that. But Brian Schottenheimer, this would not be ideal. You do, again, as Mike McCarthy is going to be calling the plays, that sort of feels like the end of the discussion, but you do have to have somebody who can manipulate the offense in a positive way. That is something that we did see from Kellen Moore. There isn't a ton of recent evidence or data to suggest that Brian Schottenheimer could do that, but we'll see obviously what the Cowboys wind up doing. Other in-house candidates, Lunda Wells, Cowboys tight ends coach. Again, we're looking at names on the offensive staff that are currently a part of the team, that are going to be a part of the team in 2023, that would make sense for a promotion. Coach Wells did post on his Instagram actually right after the season ended that he would be back for another year. There has been no official announcement beyond that, but again, you can trust somebody's personal Instagram story. This one doesn't make a ton of sense to me, but it is certainly possible. Again, if the Cowboys want to keep things internal as far as everything under Mike McCarthy's rule or supervision or whatever you want to call it, that certainly is a name that kind of fits the bill. Additionally, Scott Tolzien, who Mike McCarthy has had to be a part of everything since effectively joining the Cowboys back in 2020. Scott Tolzien kind of in a little bit of a Kellen Moore space. He's extremely early into his NFL career, but he has a lot of familiarity with Mike McCarthy from their time together in Green Bay. And that is significant. Again, if you're trying to connect dots, if you do believe that Mike McCarthy wants to have not a yes man, but somebody who he trusts, somebody who he believes he can rely on because he's going to be calling the plays, somebody who he has a high level of familiarity with, this is one of the candidates that seems to make the most amount of sense. Although, again, a very, sort of early coach in their career, and you don't want to necessarily kind of hand everything over to somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience in the NFL, right? This is an important year for the Cowboys. This is an important year for Mike McCarthy. It's an important year for Dak Prescott, and we can sit here and we can compliment them and we can talk about how great they are and the things that they have accomplished, because there is a long list of accomplishments on Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott's resumes both. But this is kind of the nowhere to hide year. This is the year where you have to figure out as a franchise, as the Cowboys, whether you do want to continue moving in this direction, obviously into 2024. 2023 is the McCarthy and Dak year in every way, shape, or form. And because that is the case, maybe if you are running the show, you want to bring in some new blood, some new line of thought, some new mindsets, et cetera, et cetera. And so these are some external candidates who the Cowboys can consider. Again, you can read David Howman's article for a little bit more thought process, at least from him, down in the description. But Byron Leftwich is a name to know. Before Kellen Moore became the offensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Chargers, he was rumored to be tied to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now we'll see obviously what happens with Tom Brady if he winds up leaving, blah, blah, blah. But the Bucs are in a very interesting spot thanks to the Cowboys, who of course ended their season in the wild card round. The Bucs were so bad on the offensive side of the ball that Tom Brady is again maybe potentially going to leave, but the Bucs did move on from Byron Leftwich. Byron, of course, somebody who has had a lot of success as a coach, somebody who a lot of people thought would be a head coach in the NFL after the Bucs won the Super Bowl now 2 years ago, obviously the 2020 season. But Byron Leftwich is a name to know. Again, if you're looking for names that are available, names that could fit, if you do want a fresh voice, somebody who could offer you something different, there's no question that the Bucs offense has had success under Byron Leftwich, but obviously the most recent sample size doesn't necessarily work in his favor. Moving on, Tom Clements. I mentioned the period of time that Mike McCarthy gave up play calling duties with the Green Bay Packers. That was when he ceded them to Tom Clements. That was in the 2015 season, part of it at least. And so Tom Clements, a name that McCarthy knows, a name that Mike McCarthy trusts. Again, that kind of goes back to the Scott Tolzien thing. There's a line of thought to this making sense. Again, if I don't mean making sense in the way that I would like it to make sense, but I think if we're trying to predict what is going to happen, it makes sense. I hope that does make sense. A name that McCarthy has trusted with play calling duties before. Think about that. Think about that for a second. Since Mike McCarthy has become a head coach in the NFL way back in 2006, there's one person who he has seemingly chosen to hand play calling duties to, and that is only Tom Clements. And you might be saying, well, he chose to hand play calling duties to Kellen Moore. Yeah, yes and no. I mean, Kellen Moore was a part of the Cowboys staff when Mike McCarthy took the job in 2020. Now, we can all sit here and believe everybody when they say that, everybody was cool with it. McCarthy was cool with it. He consulted, he made the decision, but it certainly looked like Kellen Moore was, I don't want to say forced upon Mike McCarthy, but again, he predates Mike McCarthy's time with the Cowboys. And so it is an impactful and an important data point that Tom Clements is the only person who Mike McCarthy made the conscious decision of his own volition to hand away play calling duties to. So that is certainly a name to watch. We've also got Ben McAdoo, and you might be going, Ben McAdoo don't, but Ben McAdoo is a name who Mike McCarthy values. In fact, Ben McAdoo was a part of the Cowboys staff prior to this past season. You will, of course, remember that the Carolina Panthers needing a new offensive coordinator ahead of this past season, the 2022 season. Then head coach Matt Rule very infamously said that they were going to hire a rock star offensive coordinator candidate. They took Ben McAdoo away from the Dallas Cowboys, and we can sit here and we could talk about the Panthers operation and how broken it was in a lot of different ways, which is obviously why they fired Matt Rule, although Steve Wilkes did an amazing job to get them competitive to the point that they almost actually won the NFC South. Of course, we talked about that as the playoffs were approaching, but Ben McAdoo could return to the Cowboys. Again, we're looking for people and names and coaches that we know that Mike McCarthy trusts, considering he is going to be the one calling plays. It makes sense that he would want to have an offensive coordinator who he has a high level of trust in, and Ben McAdoo seems to fit that bill. Finally, we have Frank Cignetti Jr., who is currently at the University of Pittsburgh, not Pittsburgh, just kind of a typo that we have there. Again, we're trying to connect dots. We're trying to figure things out. This sort of makes sense. If you are really looking, McCarthy is from Pittsburgh for what it's worth. That is something that has been part of his kind of history anytime anybody has talked about him. But Frank Cignetti was the quarterbacks coach for Mike McCarthy back in New Orleans when McCarthy was a part of their staff. That was a long, long, long time ago. But so often in the NFL, You can associate coaches with one another and relationships they had. Think about the fact that Mike McCarthy hired Mike Nolan when he first took over in 2020. That kind of came out of nowhere, right? It was such a weird thing for McCarthy to hire Nolan, but it was because the two had worked together in San Francisco when Mike McCarthy was the offensive coordinator and Nolan was, of course, the head coach. But those are names to know. If I had to guess personally, the one we started with, Schottenheimer does seem like the most logical choice, the most obvious dots to connect. But of course, this is a really unpredictable thing. I don't want to say the important thing because that does underscore the job that Kellen Moore did. And I don't want to say this and sort of make you think that I think this is an amazing idea. I don't have a passionate take on this one way or the other. I think this makes sense. I think that if you're the Cowboys, again, you have to come to a determination beyond a shadow of a doubt on Mike McCarthy and what he offers your football team. That is what this 2023 season is about. That's not to say the goal isn't to win the Super Bowl, but you have to learn. You have to figure this out. You have to come to an undeniable, indisputable conclusion. A year from now, we have to know whether Mike McCarthy is a part of the problem or if he is a part of the solution. So having him call plays offensively, whoever the offensive coordinator winds up being, I think is one of the ways that you can do that. We're doing some investigation here. That's kind of what we're after in the 2023 season. But who do you think the Cowboys should hire as the offensive coordinator? Let us know down in the comments. You can, of course, hit me up on Twitter or Instagram. My name is RJ Ochoa. I'm on those platforms at RJ Ochoa. On TikTok, rj.ochoa. You can send me an email, rj.ochoa@sbnation.com, or you can leave a comment, like I said, down below, where you can also find the link to David Howman's article talking about these candidates. It's going to be interesting to see who the Cowboys ultimately wind up choosing. We hope you have a great day. And I hope you have something delicious for dinner, something really, really, really good, something that you've been craving for a long time. Get it. You know why? Because you deserve it. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. We'll see you next time.